everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Dr. Merrill Matthews, the Texas State Chair at Our Republican Legacy. Dr. Matthews, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Brittany, for having me.
I'm excited to speak with you on all things Texas because voters in the Lone Star State cast their ballot in the state's primaries on Tuesday. But before we get into the race results, did anything surprise you? What are some of your main takeaways?
Well, a couple of things surprised me. For one, John Cornyn, who is running for the Republican nomination, and the incumbent senator, won by about a percentage point. Most of the polls had Ken Paxton, the current attorney general, beating him by 3 or 4 points and had been for several weeks. The other surprise is that James Talarico, a state senator from Austin area, won fairly handily above Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman who is stepping out and was looking for the Democratic Senate nomination. So James Talarico won, and there won't be a runoff there, but there will be a runoff between Cornyn and Paxton.
Let's dive right into those Senate primaries because these were reportedly the most expensive primaries in U.S. history, and this one isn't over yet, at least on the Republican side. So let's start there. The race between incumbent Senator John Cornyn and the state's Attorney General Ken Paxton, arguably one of the ugliest races in modern history, right? It got really ugly. It got really personal. What do you make of this race? What do you make of the runoff?
I think it's going to get even uglier. We have the next election, the runoff election will be May 26th. So we've got several months to go before we get to that election. And my guess is we're going to see it's been the most expensive U.S. Senate race in history, I believe, and it's going to get a lot more expensive. And especially because John Cornyn, coming in as an incumbent, established Republican, big fundraiser and so forth. And I think increasingly, in fact, I think the Kalshi prediction markets this morning sort of gave John Cornyn the edge on this significantly because I think they think independents and others will end up going with John Cornyn, but it's going to be a tough race right now.
Congressman Wesley Hunt, he was also in that race. He finished in a distant third. As of now, it's about 13.5%. That's how much of the vote he got. Do you think that without him, this race would be headed towards a runoff?
Well, without him, you would basically have just the two major candidates, and then we'd see who would come above that. Wesley Hunt has been really tried to be the most MAGA candidate in this race. And so what you would normally think is with him out, that 14% or so would probably go more to Paxton. That's conventional wisdom. On the other hand, we're going to be talking about who can beat the Democrat, and there is concern that Ken Paxton won't be able to beat James Talarico. I don't think it would be likely that Talarico would win in a Paxton-Talarico race, but it's not impossible. And so you may see a number of Wesley Hunt's people end up going over to to Cornyn just because he's the most likely one who's going to be the traditional Republican and still be a conservative view. There's probably not going to be any difference between how Paxton would vote in the Senate and how Cornyn would vote, except for perhaps ending the filibuster. Paxton, I think, would probably be more likely to end the Senate filibuster.
I work at Forbes. We love talking about money over here. So I want to read some reporting from the New York Times. They wrote this yesterday, the day of the race. Mr. Cornyn and his allies have outspent Mr. Paxton and his supporters by roughly $69 million to $4 million on advertising. When you look at the outcome of this race, it's headed towards a runoff. Although Paxton was leading in the polls, how much do you think money really talked here?
It's a really interesting question because Paxton just didn't spend much money, but he did spend a lot of time in the area, in the neighborhoods, talking to people and conversing with them. And of course, his real advantage was, as an attorney general, he has the ability to be able to get a lot of attention based upon the things he does as attorney general. He doesn't really have many constrictions on him, so he can file lawsuits, he can do a range of different things, and he's gotten a lot of attention and got a lot of support from the more MAGA voters in Texas, and there's a lot of them in Texas. So I think just by being the attorney general and the kind of attention he brought to himself, he may have felt less he may have felt less like he needed to be able to advertise on that. As you point out, John Cornyn put a lot of money in this, and we expect more money coming in. But Cornyn's been in Washington. He hasn't been able to get out in the state nearly as much, and so that may have made some difference there.
President Trump, he largely sat this race out, although he did comment on it today, on Wednesday. And I want to read in part what he posted on Truth Social. It's a large post, so I want to read just part of it. He said that the primary race, quote, cannot, for the good of the party and our country itself, be allowed to go on any longer. It must stop now. We have an easy-to-beat radical left opponent, and we have to totally focus on putting him away quickly and decisively. Both John and Ken ran great races, but not enough. Then he goes on a little bit, and then this is what he says. I will be making my endorsement soon and will be asking the candidate that I don't endorse to immediately drop out of the race. Is that fair? What do you think? Do you think that his endorsement will lead one of these two to drop out? What do you think that looks like?
It's a very good question. And my guess is if he's going to endorse, it's probably going to be Cornyn, even though Ken Paxton has tried to be the more MAGA person in the race. But the general perception is John Cornyn almost became the Senate Majority Leader. I think he's running for his fifth term. He's well respected. He's a big fundraiser, and he's more a traditional Republican. And the other thing, and this is the key point here, as an Attorney General, you can do pretty much what you want to. If you're elected to the Senate, you got to work with 99 other people, and especially those people in your party. And it's not clear Ken Paxton can do that. So if I had to guess, I would guess that President Trump will end up endorsing Cornyn and asking Paxton to step out. Whether Paxton would do that, we just don't know.
Like you said, State Representative James Talarico won the Democratic primary here for Senate. He beat pretty decisively Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She was viewed as more of the progressive. He was viewed as more of a moderate candidate. She was very critical of Trump, more vocally critical of Trump, it seemed, than Talarico. But Texas is still a solidly red state. The last time a Democrat won the Senate was over 30 years ago. And these races get national attention, right? I'm thinking of Colin Allred. I'm thinking of Beto O'Rourke. And they get so much money poured into them. Democrats pour millions and millions into them. They're high-profile races. But Republicans continue to beat decisively Democrats time and time again. But when you're thinking about James Talarico now versus either Cornyn or Paxton, do you think Texas is flippable?
I think it's possible, but I think it's really unlikely. And with Talarico, I mean, Democrats dodged a bullet by nominating Talarico because he's a former Presbyterian seminary graduate. He brings religion in, which a lot of Democrats have sort of pushed back in some cases, and he becomes a very moderate person, and he's not a bomb thrower. Jasmine Crockett was something of a bomb thrower, and it got a lot of attention, but I don't know that it was going to play that well with Democrats in Texas. So I think Talarico, whether it's going to be John Cornyn or Ken Paxton, the question is going to be who can attract more independents. I think John Cornyn can. I think if it's Paxton versus Talarico, Talarico would have some chance there.
And when you're looking at the House races all throughout the state, one that was probably the most surprising last night was the incumbent Congressman Dan Crenshaw. He lost to his opponent, State Representative Steve Toth. Late in the game, Senator Ted Cruz endorsed Toth over Crenshaw. What are your thoughts on this upset?
I was a little surprised by that because Dan Crenshaw has been such a stalwart. Now he's opposed Trump on some cases. And in Texas, being a traditional Republican like John Cornyn or having opposed Trump in a few cases, as Dan Crenshaw is, that works against you. And that's one of the reasons why both of them have had some trouble being able to get the following that they wanted to. But I'm just surprised because Dan Crenshaw was just a great veteran and a great Republican. So we'll see what happens there. I suspect Toth will end up winning that election, but I'm just sorry to see Dan Crenshaw out.
A little over a month ago, we saw a special election race that was described as a political earthquake, the state Senate race in Texas, where a Democrat won in a district that President Trump won handily in 2024. Do you think there were any political earthquakes last night, or maybe even any political tremors?
My understanding is, and I've only seen references to this, that some of the southern counties that tended to vote more Trump had voted more Democratic. In fact, we had heard as of Monday that you had that Democrats voting in pre-election, early election, ended up doubling their numbers from what they had in the last midterm election. And what that seems to indicate is there's a lot of energy on the Democratic side. I don't know if there's as much on the Republican side, but there's a lot of energy on the Democratic side right now, and that could end up turning out more voters, even Democrats who typically don't go to the poll to vote. So we'll see how that turns out, but Democrats have some energy behind them right now.
To that point, just looking at one congressional district, Texas is 34th. It has a large Latino population. It went for Trump in 2024. But when you're looking at the turnout, almost double the amount of people who voted in the Democratic primary came out and voted over those who came and voted in the Republican one. What do you think all of this, all of the results we saw last night, what do you think this means not only for the midterms, but the direction of each party?
Well, there is a battle for the Republican Party on its direction. And are we looking for the John Cornyn type of candidate? Or are we looking for the Ken Paxton type of candidate? The President Trump is not going to be running again. He won't be elected again. And so the question is, who's going to be leading the party and what's the direction for 2028? When we get past the 2026 election, it's all about the presidential election. And I think there's going to be a battle both on the Republican side and on the Democratic side, because the real energy on the Democratic side is the far progressives. And a lot of traditional Democrats, those who are a little more moderate, are not going to want to go in that direction. So I think we're going to have fights in both parties about what's the future of the party going to be.
And to that point, I mean, when you're thinking about what type of Republican people want that are Republican, do they want the John Cornyns of the world, or do they want the Ken Paxtons of the world? I mean, it seems pretty neck and neck. Do you think President Trump, when he wades into this, when he officially endorses someone, do you think that's going to really tip the scale in a meaningful way?
I don't think so. I think it may help a little bit, but President Trump is a unique candidate. He was able to rally people. When you go to his rallies, I mean, people are there. They're boisterous. They're loud. They're enjoying their time. Very few candidates have been able to do something like that. Could J.D. Vance do that, who sort of is considered the heir apparent right now? I'm not sure he can. Plus, there's a lot of good Republicans in the wings who might decide to step in. Glenn Youngkin from Virginia, Brian Kemp from Georgia. There could be DeSantis from Florida might decide to jump back in there, and even Ted Cruz might be willing to jump in there, even though there's rumors that he might be nominated for the Supreme Court. So I think it is way too early to tell. And one of the key things about the American voters, when you've gone in one direction for 8 full years under a president, they tend to swing back to the other side a little bit. Just about every presidential election, George Herbert Walker Bush was the exception in that, but just about every election, when you've had a president in for 2 full terms, the other party ends up winning the presidency, just because I think some cases the party in power seems to be losing ideas, seem to get kind of tired, and the new party comes in with more energy. So I think a Republican candidate may have a challenge when we come in 2028, but you're more likely to be able to win voters if you're going with somebody who is a bit more traditional rather than the Trump factor.
And something that we didn't even talk about until I'm going to ask you about it now is the factor, the weekend surprise, the United States striking Iran, having a multi-day conflict that President Trump says is going to last probably 4 or 5 weeks. He said we're ahead of schedule, but he predicts that's how long it's going to last. Do you think that had any impact on Tuesday's primaries? And do you think that will have any impact on the midterms, or is it too early to tell?
I think it's too early to tell, but the public is really split on this. You've got a lot of people who feel like this is an illegal war that he shouldn't have done. You've got other people who think this is absolutely, and even a Mike Pence, who's been generally anti-Trump on so many things since he left the White House, was very, very supportive of the war. From my standpoint, I think the Iranian regime needed to be gone. I'm glad it's gone. I would be more comfortable if Congress had a role in this, because constitutionally that's their position. But an awful lot of Republicans don't seem to be paying much attention to that. So I think but I do think what we don't know yet is how this is going to play out. President Trump says 4 or 5 weeks. I think I heard maybe up to 8 weeks. But this is an unknown factor. We just don't know how this is going to play out. And if we get stuck into something that's long, expensive, and taking American lives, I think the public will turn against it fairly quickly.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for between now and November, and not even November, now on May 26th, when this runoff is. And I hope you can join me and talk about this and many more things. Dr. Matthews, thank you so much for the time today. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you, Brittany. I enjoyed it.